I've had really good luck with the 1950 Popular Mechanics boat plans. This plan is for a skimmer kayak. From the plans, I was able to get enough information and get some printouts so I could digitize the plans for the frames. I'm using Trace 2018 and I'm going to start tracing out each frame. This particular frame is the small one, it's frame A. I'll be tracing out each frame and then saving it as a DXF file. You can see here I always mark my starting spot with a red or an orange pencil. Here I've selected the text command, and that'll enable me to label each frame. I save each file separately. Again, showing Trace 2018, I'm going to now trace out and digitize frame B. These are very easy to trace out because it's all straight lines. You might notice before I start to trace out each frame, I do the perimeter of the frame by touching the four corners. This gives me a nice full-size image on the computer screen. And I always mark out my start spot because I don't want to have a crossed vector. So that's the red or the orange pencil marks you see on the diagram. The text label selection is a neat function. There are 4 frames to trace out, A, B, C, and D, but when I cut them, I'll be duplicating A, B, and C, so there's 7 frames total. I also cut out an extra D frame, as I wanted the D frame to be doubled, because that's where some of the plywood is going to join up in the middle of the kayak. This is a good spot to show you that if you make a mistake when you're tracing, it's easy to edit out. You just select Edit, delete that portion, and redraw it. Using a CNC machine to cut out these frames is just fantastic because the accuracy is 100%. So those batten strips will fit into those grooves perfectly. Nice, snug, and tight. Again, I'm using the text command. This one is frame D, and I'm going to cut 2 of these and glue them together because this is where the plywood sides, the plywood top, this is where the joint is going to be. Those small rounded corners you see where the batten fits into the frame, that's for glue relief, and that's called a fillet. That was the last frame for tracing. This is the full-size plan for the kayak. It's just under 12 feet. To trace the kayak full size, I'm using Trace 2018. The jumbo tray setup that I have, I could trace out a 25-foot boat. The tracing of something this size is easy and smooth. Just some information on the material I used. I used 1/4-inch plywood for the top of the boat and for the bottom. I used 5/8 plywood for the frames, and I used basswood for the battens. And I also used basswood for the keelson, and it was 3/4 by 2 inches by 12 feet long. Shown here, I'm going to use Jumbo Trace 2018 to trace out the cockpit area. I'm going to load the frame files into Vectric Aspire 10.5. Here I'm going to do the nesting and set up the toolpath for the CNC cut. Also run the simulator to see how it's going to look. Shown here, I'm running the CNC machine. I'm using a 1/4 inch end mill, running about 60 inches per minute at about 21,000 RPM. I did not program any tabbing in the toolpath. I'm just using a small finishing nail, and as the machine cuts, I just put in a few nails to hold my parts down. I found it easy just to pause the machine, add a few nails, and continue my cut. The cuts went smooth, and because I nested all the parts on the left-hand side, I ended up having a half a sheet left over for another project. This next video coming up, it shows the knees being cut. These knees are reinforcing from the stern and bow to the keelson. This shot shows all the frames cut out. I took these cutout frames and put them back on the diagram just to see how accurate the cut was. I've got the batten strips clamped together so I can mark off where the frames are attached. Here I've assembled the first few frames. I used a piece of rope to try and bring the battens together. Then I used a bolt to really tighten up. Shown here, I've got the battens, keelson, the stern and the bow, and the knees in place. I'm finished with the boat frame. In the next video, I will show the top and the bottom and the sides being applied.